The morning atmosphere in Beijing carries its usual mix of precision and calm, the kind that defines daily briefings at China's foreign ministry reporters settle in, cameras perched on tripods, pens ready, waiting for the slight movement of the podium microphone that signals the beginning of another exchange between China and the world. As Mao Ning steps forward, the subdued chatter quiets immediately. Her arrival, unhurried yet deliberate, reflects the structured rhythm of these gatherings, where a single sentence can shape a diplomatic narrative stretching across continents. Today's focus, however, comes from far beyond Beijing. A health scare in Australia and New Zealand involving asbestos contamination discovered in children's play sand imported from China. The issue, small in origin but potentially vast in consequence, has already prompted temporary school closures, urgent safety inspections, and questions about cross-border product oversight. In a global economy where imports and exports move in an unending stream, the idea that something as innocent as children's sand could trigger such alarm underscores how interconnected and fragile the system can be. As Mao Ning looks up from her notes, the room's attention converges on her. She states, with practiced clarity, "We have noted the relevant reports and also noted that local Australian businesses have stated they are communicating with suppliers to resolve the issues." Her words, delivered in Mandarin but translated instantly in the minds of veteran correspondents, mark China's official posture: acknowledgement without escalation, recognition without direct acceptance of blame. It is the tone Beijing often adopts when faced with safety concerns tied to exported goods, a blend of procedural calm, diplomatic caution, and a reminder that supply chains are multi-layered and collaborative. The journalists know what this means. They also know what it does not say. Behind the short sentence lies a broader story, the delicate balance between trade relationships, public safety, and political narrative. Australia and New Zealand, both nations with strict regulations on asbestos and deep sensitivity to public health risks, moved quickly once small traces were detected. Schools closed, parents expressed alarm, and local authorities began tracing the supply chain back to its source. These moments are the ones that test the machinery of international commerce, moments where trust, accountability, and reputation weigh heavily on every actor involved. For China, the world's manufacturing giant, such incidents carry significant implications over the past 2 decades. Beijing has worked tirelessly to project the image of a country capable of producing goods at scale while meeting global safety standards. The country's export ecosystem is vast, composed of thousands of factories, subcontractors, and raw material suppliers. A single contamination incident, especially involving something designated for children, creates waves that ripple far beyond the borders of the importing countries. In this case, asbestos, a substance banned or heavily restricted in most of the world due to its carcinogenic properties, triggers immediate alarm. The fact that the contaminated product is children's play sand intensifies the emotional and political reaction. Schools are symbolic spaces, places of safety, learning, and trust. When they shut their doors because imported sand may carry one of the most notorious industrial hazards in history, the public conversation accelerates rapidly. Legislators begin asking questions, regulators expand inspections, and local businesses scramble to reassure anxious parents. The scrutiny widens, often reaching not just the specific product in question, but other imports from the same region, sector, or country. As Mao Ning answers follow-up questions, maintaining an even, measured tone, she reiterates the same themes. China is aware, and China acknowledges that Australian companies are working with suppliers. It is a subtly layered statement, one that places responsibility within the shared space of trade partnerships rather than on one side alone. It is also a reminder that China expects issues to be handled through established channels rather than public confrontation. For journalists in the room, the visual details matter almost as much as the words. The wide shot of Mao Ning arriving, the close-up of her speaking, the view of the press conference underway, they collectively frame the story as one anchored in formal diplomacy, not crisis. Beijing wants calm. Beijing wants control of the narrative. Beijing wants to signal cooperation without concession. This is a familiar pattern in international communication, especially involving product standards, where the language must walk the line between acknowledgement and defense, between openness and sovereignty. But beyond the room, the story stretches wider. In Australia, talkback radio hosts discuss the irony of children's sand, a symbol of innocence, becoming a vessel for a hazardous substance. Parents share concerns online, wondering how something like this could slip through regulatory cracks. Schools issue apologies, not because they caused the contamination, but because they must manage its consequences. Meanwhile, environmental health experts explain how even trace levels of asbestos can trigger strict precautionary responses, especially in educational settings. New Zealand faces similar questions. Local authorities there, known for their rigorous enforcement of safety standards, immediately began testing other batches of imported sand. In both countries, the incident rekindles long-running debates about reliance on imported materials, the structure of safety inspections at ports of entry, and the broader question of product transparency across global supply chains. For China, the episode also becomes part of a larger conversation about its role in global manufacturing. Mao Ning's calm delivery at the podium echoes Beijing's broader preference: minimize diplomatic friction, emphasize cooperation, and present China as a responsible partner willing to address issues through dialogue. Yet the world is watching closely, not because of the sand alone, but because such incidents layer onto existing perceptions and political currents. Global health and safety concerns tied to imported products are not new. Over the years, numerous nations, including Western countries, have faced similar incidents with faulty components, mislabeled goods, or contaminated materials. Each episode extends beyond the specifics of the product and becomes woven into broader narratives about oversight, regulation, and trust. And as trade networks grow ever more complex, with components sourced from multiple countries before arriving at their final destination, accountability becomes a shared responsibility. In Beijing, the press conference continues smoothly. Mao Ning takes additional questions unrelated to the asbestos matter, regional diplomacy, trade updates, and geopolitical developments. But for many reporters, the brief remarks on the sand contamination stand out. They know this story will continue to evolve. More testing will be conducted in Australia and New Zealand, more supplier records examined, more political statements issued, and China's response, measured today, will be revisited depending on what investigations uncover. The wider implication is clear. In an age where national safety concerns intersect with global supply chains, even a simple commodity like sand becomes a diplomatic topic. The voiceover emphasizes this connection, guiding the audience through the layers of context: the initial discovery in school sandpits, the immediate public health response, the traceability challenge of identifying the supplier, and the subtle dance of diplomatic language in Beijing. Each part of the chain, parents, schools, importers, exporters, regulators, and ministries, plays a role in the unfolding story. As the narrative expands, it also invites reflection on how modern globalization demands both vigilance and collaboration. Countries rely on each other not only for trade, but for safety standards, transparency, and swift communication. And when something goes wrong, as it has here, the challenge becomes not only identifying the source, but maintaining trust between partners. In the final stretch of the briefing, Mao Ning maintains the composed demeanor expected of a foreign ministry spokeswoman. Her brief but carefully chosen words serve a purpose. They anchor China's message in acknowledgement without agitation, a strategic posture that signals attention while deflecting direct responsibility. It is the diplomatic equivalent of stabilizing the waters while investigations continue across oceans. As the cameras stop recording and reporters begin typing their dispatches, the story lifts from the room and enters the global news cycle, carried by the voiceover's narrative weight. It is no longer just about a statement from a podium. It is about how nations respond to shared challenges, how global supply chains must be scrutinized, and how something as simple as children's sand can spark an international conversation. The story will continue. Investigations will reveal more. But today, in Beijing, one sentence delivered with poise becomes the anchor of a narrative that stretches across Asia and Oceania. And in that single moment, carefully articulated at the Foreign Ministry briefing, China signals that it is watching, it is aware, and it is prepared to address the issue on its own terms and through the mechanisms of cooperation it prefers.